Hey, I'm Cade, and this is Cade Made. Welcome to this small living room makeover. In this video, I'll be showing you the process that I went through to create a unique and art-filled boho oasis for a friend I was house sitting for. We're pretty good friends, so I don't think it's a big deal that I redid the living room. I used a lot of items and inspiration from what I found within the space. He has a lot of boho-inspired and personal items, which make for a lovely bohemian-style space, and so I simply just leaned into that. I ended up loving a lot of the smaller decor items, like those baskets, that chrome side table to the left of the sofa, this interesting batik wall hanging that's framed that you see next to the door there, and a lot of the smaller items like the books. This carpet is amazing. I really did like it and do like it. One of the things I also liked are the driftwood pieces, the different horn, the art glass you see there. I even really like the bamboo window coverings. I think they're a bit of a throwback, but they're a really nice contrast to the white trim, white walls, and white floor. One of the things I do believe is really important when beginning a project is to completely clean out the space as much as possible. If you have some big furniture that you have to keep in there, keep it in there, but clean out the space otherwise. That way you can start getting creative with your thinking, like I'm doing in the upper right-hand corner. I go into my Pinterest brain, I start thinking of ways I can enhance this small living room. One of the things I immediately thought of was doing some sort of flower or leafy tropical muraling on the wall that would enhance it, just give it a bit of an extra flair right in the door before I put any furniture in it. So I started looking up different tropical plant murals using those search words, and I found some interesting ideas. A lot of them were wallpapers, but I wanted to do something that involved materials that I already had within my reach. Once the space was cleared out, it was absolutely gorgeous, and that light ambient nature of the light coming in the windows was so inspiring to me. I wanted to retain that. So the first project was just getting some leaves up on the wall. I Google imaged some images of a split leaf philodendron, projected it on the wall, and then traced all of the leaves of the philodendron plant that I found. I used a green colored pencil so that once I painted on it, it would match the paint colors that I chose. The other leaf is a fan palm, which I think is just really nice and geometric and was going to just enhance that small corner next to the window. And then the final plant is a banana leaf plant, and I thought that that would just be great. These are colors that I already had, these sort of muted greens. I picked one for each leaf on each wall. To get the colors on the wall, I simply used foam brushes from a stenciling pack that I got at the craft store. You can see on the banana leaf palm in the upper portion of the video, I blocked in quite a bit of that palm like it was in the video, and then discovered that it was too blocked in and I wanted to put in a little bit more detail, so I just put a little bit more white back where there was green painted on and created a little bit more of a silhouette. Obviously, something else you could do is use this on one wall, trace your leaves individually and combine them with the different colors to add dimension, but just creating one accent piece. Without having done this before, I would still rate this as a entry-level beginner sort of DIY. I think it adds a lot to the room, and I think it's something anybody could do. Not to mention that it's quite relaxing. It's like adult coloring. It's really adult coloring. It's decor coloring. This next little craft DIY is paper flowers made from paper coffee filters. What I did was I took the coffee filters, I wet them down, and then I painted them with watercolor paint. After I painted each one in a different thematic, patterned, color-schemed way, I sprayed them down and then I dried them all separately. And after I dried them, I started folding them much like you would do a snowflake, a paper snowflake. I folded this one into sections, into eighths, and then I cut the more fanned out portion into a leaf shape. And after I cut out that leaf shape, I took it apart and then I just twisted the bottom to create the paper flower. On this next one, I just experimented with a cutting technique at the top to make it look a little bit more like a multicolored carnation. I thought it turned out nicely. On some of the other ones, I decided to use a different folding technique, nothing specific, just randomly, and I created this snapdragon looking flower. I also layered the different coffee filters that I had painted, similar themes, and made other flowers that were a little bit bigger and a little bit more full. These broader petal flowers look a little bit like magnolias to me, and I like that. This one turned out beautiful. It looks like a beautiful sort of aquamarine carnation with a nice warm center. That's one of my favorites. I just love that larger magnolia shape. It's really, really pretty to me. So after I created several of these paper flowers, I took some paper cord and just simply hot glued the twisted end of the paper flower onto the paper cord to create a stem. And after I put those stems together and bunched it into a little bouquet, I wrapped it with a little bit of floral wire and cut off the end of that. Just to finish off the outer portion of that, I twisted the wire a little tight so that the bunch stayed together, and I unwound a bit of my paper cord, and then I simply cut a section that was large enough and hot glued it around my little teeny bouquet of paper flowers. And I just thought that it was a lovely gift that you could give to somebody for any occasion, and they would love it because it was made by you. Isn't that so pretty? Oh, I love it. This next craft DIY is a wall hanging using some simple macrame techniques. First, I took this soft acrylic graduated color yarn and I cut very long lengths to make just a center fringe, just to get myself started. And then I started taking lengths on each side of that center fringe that I took maybe 20 or so lengths of, sometimes 15, about 4 feet long each, which turned into 2 feet fringe, and just added it on until the color started graduating into these more aqua tones, creating a little bit of variation on the fringe, which will be the lower part of this wall hanging. After putting as much of the yarn fringe as I thought was needed, I hung it up and then combed it out with a fork because the forks have wide teeth. And I started cutting from the outer towards the center to create sort of a tapered look towards the center. I did not think of it any more than just doing 2 at a time at similar lengths so that when it was all pulled together, it looked like a single graduated form moving towards the center. The 2 center lengths were particularly long for the next part of this hanging wall piece. On a side note, I'd like to mention that if you're here for the fashion, you can see I'm wearing my work cap, which is always dirty, always looks like I've been working really hard. So the next part, I took a set of dyed feathers that I bought in a pack for maybe $2.99 or $1.99, and I simply glued those onto those longer strands that I left on the fringe. This is something that you can do however you want. You can add as many feathers. The terracotta rope you see I cut lengths of, I just cut super long lengths and then I just did a simple loop over the top as my top portion that I'm going to be incorporating a little bit more macrame technique into to give it a bit more pattern and a sculptural quality. During the process of making this wall hanging, I did consult a bunch of different tutorial and DIYs about macrame and different wall hangings, and I just used the materials I had around and created something that I liked and I thought was great. So I'm showing you my success in pulling these macrame knots opposite from where I tied them at the top. And this is me successfully doing it. I encourage you to use a DIY tutorial to find the techniques that's best for you in this process, because it took me a while to find this simplest one that I did. You can see in the center, I'm starting to create this woven diamond shape where the macrame is creating a weaving, and then I'm taking these other fringe pieces, the remaining ones that I had left, and sort of incorporating them without weaving them. And then once I got those on, I actually discovered that I wanted to change it up a bit and incorporate a little bit more of a rattan quality with this paper rope that I just twisted around and glued on with a hot glue gun. And then after that, I retied those knots just by loosening them and creating what would be the upper portion of the DIY wall hanging, which you will see finished in the final walkthrough of the space. And in the final projects for this living room makeover, I took this Ottoman, which I had bought at the thrift store and previously covered with that wonderful, wonderful sort of paisley fabric. I took the legs off and the previous cover off, and it revealed just the basic form underneath, which I am covering with canvas drop cloth. The canvas drop cloth is a 6x9 portion. I leaned it to one side so that it was centered to one edge of it and measured out each side so that I had enough to pull underneath the bottom of the frame. I cut the drop cloth and then I began folding sections of it and modifying it so that it fit around the bottom and I could pull the tension of the fabric. Once I measured that out, I attached the corners with my staple gun or my upholstery brad gun and just got the corners nice and tight. And then once I got the corners all tacked on, I started folding the sides inward and creating a pleat so that it looked more complete along the edges. I wanted that pleat to be even on all 4 corners of the Ottoman. After completing my pleats, I cut off all of my excess fabric, and then I began folding the edges up nice and tight and evenly as possible, and then stapling down each part of the Ottoman and distributing how I'm stapling it across evenly so that I wasn't pulling the fabric at the top in weird angles. I think in terms of upholstering anything, starting with an ottoman or a piece of furniture that doesn't have a lot of edges or arms or legs that you have to upholster around, it's a great way to start. And it doesn't have to be perfect and it doesn't have to be genius. It just has to be gorgeous. That's all. To finish this project up, I put the legs that came with it back on and kept that thing clean until I got it back in the living room. It looks great. I think it's a pretty easy project to begin any sort of upholstery job with, and the canvas looks wonderful. Moving right along to finish this project up, I started bringing in back the items that I thought I was going to use in this, and I just want you to see how I kind of circulate what I think I'm going to use in a space when I'm bringing it back in. I just play with the furniture, play with all of the stuff, and then ultimately I decide what ultimately has to go. So the sofa had to go. Look at the sofa. It's way too dark and it's really not that comfortable, and I happen to have a sofa on hand. So the sofa went, and then I just kind of arranged what I had in the space and decided that the rug had to go too. So the rug went. I just kept this other rug. The sofa I had is a Kivik sofa, which I got in the 65% off section at IKEA. The original cover was the gray cover, which costs $99 to replace, and then the other covers are around $250. So to get the look I wanted, I just decided to use more canvas drop cloths. I used several 6x9 canvas drop cloths for the covering the sofa, and I did it very similar to the way I did the ottoman. I started working from the outer portions of the arms and working my folds inward so that I would complete the stapling and the tensioning of my fabric towards the center where the cushions are going to be. And my rule of thumb generally with this was just make as minimal folds obvious as possible. That's all. And also use your biggest panels and tack them down first before you do the smaller panels. It will create a nicer look, I believe. One thing also to pay attention to is mimicking your folds and the way that you designed each arm exactly on both sides and having a continuity across your piece. Whether or not it looks completely perfect or not, continuity is what gives it a larger sense of awareness and a design aesthetic. So finishing up the arms was pretty simple, other than the fact that I had to go back and consult my other arm to get it correct. Work from the back towards where the seat cushions are going to be when you're doing the back and the base. That's all I did here. I took my excess fabric off of the bottom, and then I'm going to use that in the lower seat cushion area of the sofa. Just a small strip that I tack on the bottom of the sofa, and then I folded it and attached it to the sides and one tack in the center to hold it where it's going to be held underneath the cushions. To make the cushions, I simply made bags out of the canvas material. It was one 6x9 canvas per each 2 cushions. One 6x9 for the back cushions, one 6x9 for the seat cushions. I cut each size almost identically. I did not use pins. I did not use measuring tools. I simply eyeballed this and made sure that I had enough canvas to get through it. I am by no means an expert at using a sewing machine, but I have learned some techniques to help me make things look more finished. So I used one of those on these covers for the cushions. I sewed it one direction, and then I flipped it inside out, and then I sewed it another direction. And what that does is it holds the seams together and creates a more finished detail along the outer parameter of the cushion that you're making. This is just something that I've learned so that it doesn't look like you just have a very basic, boring seam along the edge. On the base cushions, I made sure I gave myself a little bit of extra on those because I knew that they were going to be tighter to fit on because the material in the base cushion is much more firm. So these drop cloths are super soft, and some drop cloths can have more of a stiff quality to them, and I don't know how comfortable that is when you're sitting on it, so I chose these because of how soft they were. Another way to get softness into the canvas drop cloths is simply by washing them, but you want to be consistent with the drop cloths you're using for each project. So for this project, I used the same exact company from the same place drop cloth so that there wasn't any inconsistencies, because this fabric is not pulled together to look consistent across the board. But if you find the same batch, it's going to look similar within what you're using it for. This is a very loose stitch that I did on the cushions that are going to be towards the base and the back. And that's just, I made it very, very loose so that you could clean it. And then I put the Kivik sofa back together the way that it was supposed to be pulled back together, and started pulling the space together entirely so it could be ready for my friend who's coming home soon. I think with any DIY projects that you choose to do to enhance a space, you should just make it as fun as possible and within the scope of what you want and how much time you want to take doing these projects. So I didn't do the most masterful job upholstering the sofa, but I think it will last a long time the way it is, and I think it looks pretty dang good for spending $40 to recover the entire thing. And you can see here, I just started playing around. It's time to decorate for the final walkthrough. I really had so much fun creating this magical oasis of a space for my friend to come home to. I think he'll be so knocked out, and I think that he'll feel relieved to have such a cleansing environment. One of the things I didn't want to lose after I cleaned out the space was the openness, the lightness of it. So I used a lot of softening. I did these floor to ceiling pieces of fabric over a bamboo rod, different textures, different varieties, just to create length. I used these hanging bottles on twine rope that I found in his bedroom window. This old radiator cover is the TV stand. I upgraded the TV because I just happened to have one around. I used a lot of things that I found, that horn piece, these baskets. I did add a basket or two, bringing in the leaning ladder to put the bookcase on, and some of the tchotchkes that he had lying around was just so perfect. It didn't add too much bulk to the room and added a little bit of interest. The paper flowers looked so lovely in that art glass vase. The driftwood pieces, I added a serenity fountain and incorporated this wood craft piece with a succulent on it that I made a while back. And overall spreading out this interesting decor throughout the room so that there's lots to look at from different angles. All of the furniture is scaled to the room. Nothing is too big or too commanding on the eye for the room. The coffee table Ottoman can be used as extra seating if there's more people there in the future, while still being a coffee table. And nothing so heavy that it can't be moved at some point to accommodate something else, or a different activity like doing yoga or something within the room. It's always just amazing with how much quality you can come up with thrift items and incorporating handmade items like the MACRAME wall piece that we made. And I used all things that I had previously purchased for other projects which I hadn't used, and things that I found. And so it's all just really, really a fun, intuitive process. And you get to choose how much effort you're going to put into each particular DIY that you want to do. And that's that. And this is nearly the end of this small living room makeover transformation. I truly hope my friend enjoys the space as much as I enjoyed creating it for him. And I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this video gave you some inspiration to incorporate into your oasis or your next project. And I will be seeing you soon. And you've made it this far. So from the bottom of my stinking heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Handmade. I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you so much.